Welcome to Afroroots. I'm Noma Mbereko, and I'm sitting here today with Edward Kamanyi and Dr. James Bvirakare. This is our Afroroots Wellbeing special, and in this one, we're going to talk about you, and we're going to look at what we can do to support and look at how we support you. And you is yourself, your body, your mind, your soul, your family, your work, and all those things that make who you are. So I'm sitting here today with Edward and Dr. J. And we really want to talk about COVID. So I'll let you guys do a quick intro yourself, and then we'll get on to talking about COVID.
Hi, I'm James. I'm a GP, and I'm working in Victoria.
I'm Edward Kamanyi, and I'm a mental health social worker, also working in Victoria.
Thanks, guys, and thanks for joining this wellbeing series. I think it's going to be really helpful because we're going to explore a number of topics and a number of issues and challenges that we face as Africans or anyone really living away from home in the diaspora. And today we picked COVID because this has been a situation that we found ourselves in the last almost 2 years. The whole world's been shaken. And I just wanted to take some time for us to explore this COVID, talk about maybe some of the challenges that we've faced and what we can do. So really excited that we've got a whole broad range of expertise in the room today that we can draw from. So I suppose the first thing is, what is COVID? Because there's been so many theories. People talk about it all the time. You read different things. It would be just, I'm interested, Dr. James, maybe you could, unpack that. Unpack this virus for us that has come to the world and shaken us to the core.
Thanks, Noma. I think that's a very good starting point by actually trying to describe what is COVID, really. COVID is a viral infection, and it's one of the group of viruses which has been going around for quite some time. And unfortunately, with COVID, it has spread and to become a pandemic. There are two words which are being thrown around: pandemic, epidemic. If your disease is actually confined to a local environment and more people in the community are affected, it's an endemic.
Right.
But if you get more epidemics in a region covering larger things, it becomes a pandemic.
Right. That's good to know because I've always wondered the difference between an endemic, pandemic.
So really, COVID is actually a virus. We don't know where it came from, and we think it's one of those that has jumped from one species, which is animals, to then infect human beings. And it's not unique because we have been getting this over the years. Now, we have had the recent pandemics was actually, we talk about the SARS virus, which we think actually affected in 2003 or so about, was quite well contained by quarantine. And then we also can go back a little bit in our recent memory. We can talk about the HIV pandemic, which we can also relate to quite easily, being Africans, because it decimated a lot of us populations. So pandemics are common, and they tend to come roughly at about 1 to 2 generations. We'll get a new pandemic.
And thank you for kind of breaking this down for us and simplifying, because I think what a lot of the fear that we have with COVID is that it's new, it's this this massive pandemic that's come through. We've never had anything like it. I know people talk about the Spanish flu, but you're right, we've had swine flu. I recall that a few years ago. So that's SARS. That's the same as the swine flu that you told me.
So we with really the viruses, we don't only get in human beings. We do get them really in animals as well. And I think before the outbreak of COVID, which is actually SARS-2, then
that's the science bit. The SARS-2, SARS-1.
Before that, we had really a series of African swine. The swine fever, which killed a lot of pigs, particularly in China and Europe.
I remember that.
It didn't come to Australia, which is because we are an island. We are really lucky in that way. And so really COVID is actually something that is going to be with us today and in the future. And probably it will run its course and then eventually follow the natural history of disease, and it will start plateauing and then eventually die down.
Thank you. And I think that's the that's what's good to understand, and I suppose to support us in not being so fearful that this is not the first virus. It's one that's traveled faster and further. It's one that's impacted the world as we know it in our memory the most, but it's not a concept of a virus in communities. And I think for us Africans, we've had those things. We've had outbreaks, we've had cholera, we've had things that are outbreaks that impact a community as a whole or larger. So I think you're keeping that in mind as we deal with the fear, because I think that's one of the things that we're seeing with COVID is that fear.
I'd like to think that probably what is slightly different or at this point in time is the rate of spread. I think it's the rate of spread that has probably made it a lot more different from any other pandemics that we've had before. Because this one has kind of gone a little bit wider and literally covered the whole world.
Yes.
So in most cases in the past you would hear pockets of the world experiencing these pandemics, but the spread has not been one where it's generally covered the whole world. So that is probably one of the key issues that's different.
And I wonder that with the way information travels now, we're so aware of what's happening everywhere. Whereas in the past, we could have a cholera outbreak in a small country in Africa. No one will hear about it. Maybe it might come on the news here and again. Whereas this is something that you knew live, what's happening in America, what's happening in China, and that then grows that sense of fear of we feel under threat as a human species. So I guess for us here and in the context of what we're trying to do is talk to really our people in the community and across all communities really, but Afroroots has always been centered around trying to support that unique situation we have as Africans living away from home and living in a different environment. So I guess for me, when I'm thinking about COVID and all the information I'm hearing is how can I keep myself safe? How do we keep ourselves safe? What do we do here? We've got this pandemic, endemic, epidemic. What do we do? What do I do as an individual? What do I do as a family? There's so much out there that you start to worry about what's the best way to protect yourself and your family.
I think that's actually a very pertinent question because one of the things that has come out from COVID, like you mentioned, is you've got the social media, which is spreading a lot of things, but actually it's also how we live. I think we have traveled really very far and we were traveling quite a lot. Traveling in itself really poses a risk to us. And we know that the disease has spread really fast simply because we are marketing, our traveling,
Mobile
tourism. We are very mobile people now. So the most important thing is quarantine has got a role to play and reduce the number of chances of you getting infected. The second thing that now we have, which is really good, is actually the vaccination. The vaccination is really quite important because what it does is it reduces the chances of you getting a serious infection. It does not prevent you from getting infected. The most important thing for our communities is to bear in mind is the diseases affect us because of the way we think and the way we handle them, and the way, if we are actually really more proactive about illnesses and everything else, the chances of us being affected becomes less. But if we wait for us after we've been affected, then the outcomes are going to be pretty much like what has happened in the previous pandemics, HIV, SARS, cholera, and everything else, where we'll get decimated and we wonder why. And this is actually particularly evident in other communities. If we look at the United States of America, where you find a lot of blacks were actually the ones who were dying. It's not because they are blacks, but also because how we actually live.
And we're very communal, aren't we? So I guess I've got a couple of questions, Dr. J, for me, and it's around the vaccine. Because there's a lot of fear, and I think in our communities as well, it's good for us to explore that fear. And I might come after that to you, Ed, because I think there are other issues that have impacted challenges of day-to-day life within the pandemic itself, living every day in this space. But I'm going to go back to the vaccine and just think about, thinking about when I had to make that decision. I had to make a decision about taking the vaccine myself. I had to take a decision about my child, who's 13, that do we inject her. But But there were so many theories. People were worried about, what's going to happen to your body long term. There was some issues around fertility. There were so many things out there. So that's one bit. Maybe if you can just unpack that bit a little bit. But I think what's also interesting is you're highlighting that the vaccine itself will keep you from being very, very unwell. Because when you think about it, really, if I can see it as a cold or a flu, without the fear of the rest of it and the transmission, it would be like me getting flu or cold any other time if I know that I can be safe. So I guess the vaccine is so that when I do get it, or if I do get it, I respond to it as I would if I had any other cold in terms of physically. But in terms of those theories, and I know I don't want to hold you to expertise and say, tell me that it's safe, because we only know what we know. But I guess it's just really thinking about maybe any remarks around the other vaccines that we've had in our lifetimes. I know growing up, we had polio, diphtheria, we had, a number of vaccines as children.
I think it's really quite important to address the myths as well as some of the things that are really making us quite fearful of the vaccines. Traditionally, what we tend to do is when something new comes, we are always scared of it. But as time goes on, we get used to it. We know that it hasn't affected us. The vaccines, which are basically, we've got about 3 vaccines, but there are other vaccines which are available in Africa, which are coming from Noma, from China, as well as from Europe, and Johnson. They are now the novel vaccines. The future actually rests on that, okay? And they are very effective. And we are hoping that probably also that's how we are going to have a vaccine for malaria. The vaccines are not there to kill us. The vaccines are not there to eliminate or prevent you from having further children for Africans, so that we don't produce more babies and
all the myths out there. Yes, I've heard it all.
So the vaccines are really quite important in that aspect, and they do not cause us that, because we know that everyone is getting them. So we are not the only selected ones who are not getting that. I'm giving it to everyone in the wider Australian community. So I wouldn't say that they are there to control us. I think the social media here has played a role in actually highlighting and sensitizing people and even scaring people about these vaccines. But on the whole, they are actually very safe vaccines, and I would really say the vaccines are like, they give you a head start, so that when you get infected, your body now knows this. Remember, we don't know anything about COVID. Our body immune system doesn't recognize that. Hence, it gets the surprise of its life when you get infected and you are not vaccinated.
And somebody gave me a very good, we're trying to explain to my daughter actually about the vaccine and what that means. And he was like, it's basically something that's put in you to go and wake up your soldiers. Say, next time you see this thing, kill it. And that was the simplest, really simple, that it's just, basically a message to your soldiers that keep you healthy, to say, when you see this little bug,
watch out,
kill it and get rid of it. So, just talking to the community out there that, let's not be afraid. We want to be safe, we want to be healthy, get that vaccine, get tested. You won't know what's wrong with you unless you get tested. There is enough information out there. We don't want to go over and over ground that's been touched on already. And we'll be able to sit out here today like this because we're all double vaccinated. We've all made sure that everybody is nice and clear, so we can sit here, and that's what we want to do. So we'll just take a little commercial break, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of those challenges that we've faced, and I'll probably talk a lot more to you, Ed, around the social challenges that we've faced in living with COVID. Join us in a few minutes. It's Noma here from Afroroots. Thanks. Welcome back. It's Noma here on Afroroots. I'm here with Edward and Dr. J. And this particular episode is around COVID. And if you joined us earlier on, we were simply just trying to get a bit of a definition or understanding what it is. We talked about what it was, and that there's been other viruses. And of course, we talked about what we can do to protect ourselves, which included the vaccine, that personal hygiene, and really understanding how this virus works. Earlier on, I touched on a point that while this virus has affected us all worldwide, we want to talk really in this series to our African brothers and sisters out in the community and talk about how it impacted us, because it's been 18 months of really being impacted. Yeah, almost 2 years. I hadn't thought about it much. It'd be 2 years where the world stood still. And I think it's important to acknowledge some of those day-to-day impacts of living with COVID. And Ed, you're the mental health guy in our unit. It might be, I just wonder whether you could, I suppose, remark or talk to us a little bit about some of those challenges.
Yeah. I think if you think of if you look at us as a community of African background, one of the key things that is very pertinent to us is that we exist in a community. We have a tendencies to be communal.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what COVID has done is that it's isolated us. It's put all of us into small pockets
And that's very hard.
of our rooms, of our small, families.
Yeah.
And for us to adapt to that, most people would have struggled because we like the communal sense. We like to gather and celebrate and laugh and eat and be merry. So in a sense, COVID has taken that away from us. Now, how do we cope with those experiences? And individually, you will find that people will cope with these things differently. Okay? The statistics suggest that to some extent, there has been maybe an increase in family violence overall, not just within the African communities, but overall there have been increases in numbers. We are seeing an increase in requests for mental health support, particularly among the young children. And this is not just something that is limited to the African community.
Are you seeing more in the African community?
Statistically, I do not have the evidence of that, but if you look at the general population, there has been an increase in those services, and I would assume that it's not any different in the African community.
Or
and
the need is not different.
The need is not different, but I would probably assume that it's probably even more because of the fact that we have that communal sense.
The impact will be great on us.
The impact will be great on us. So those are some of the things that people will probably recognize within their individual spaces. But then the idea is that how do we then cope with those things? How do we recognize them in a way that we have to keep going? And I think that's where the access to services, connecting, finding the right information to help you process what is happening is really very important. And if you go to the African Family Services website, there will be opportunities to really educate yourself around what is available and what you can access. The other thing is like what Dr. James said earlier. I think it's about time we are recognized that getting that vaccination is very important because I can tell you how much I'm desperate to travel somewhere.
Oh,
Talk about that.
I think the biggest thing for me was homeschool. And being at home with my family. I love my family. They were amazing. But you don't think about that generally. We're not designed to be together in a small space every day. It can put a marriage at risk of harm.
Absolutely.
It can be.
It is really difficult because now 24/7 I was sitting there with my wife and then we had to learn how to live together.
Yes.
For the first time, and those are the challenges that put stress on us. And if we do not really watch, we actually start breaking as a family, which is the very really central things to us. And then without the family, we are nothing. We need the family, and we need to emphasize that really we need to spend more time to say, how do we get that? And there are always services which are available. And I think always the starting point is the GP. If you really cannot reflect on what's happening, start recognizing what's really happening
for you.
You know, and because really you are part of the the central gear to the whole system for it to work very well.
Yeah. And we always think about when we go to the GP, I have to go because I've got a pain or I've got this. And that's still a space that I'm learning now, that I can come and say to my GP, hey, I don't know, I'm not sleeping. I'm not, I'm struggling with this. And it might be something that's physical, but it also can start to indicate that, hey, there's something else to it. And I think when I look at us in the African community, you're right, we're so communal. I was so used that I didn't have to learn how to cook jollof rice because I could go to my friends and they'll eat it there. I knew that if there was anything was an excuse to get together. So, and that's to the core of ourselves. So that isolation would really, really, I know it impacted me because what I started to try and do is it took me a while to realize I can video call. That I can, because we were so used to seeing each other.
Absolutely.
I would spend time not seeing people that I live next to, but I can call them. So, things like making use of those, if you're in isolation or in quarantine, or I think we're now so mobile, thankfully, we can get around. But if you find yourself in a space where you've been isolated or you have to isolate, you can still keep connected. Talk to your family on the phone, the video calls these days, WhatsApp video, send videos, because at home sometimes you can't, like I know with people in Africa, I had to end up sending a video of myself as opposed to a video call. It took me a while, almost 12 months before I thought, oh, hang on, I can just send that, But one of the other things that you touched on was mental health in children, because for 2 years, children have not gone to school. For us, we were going to work, we were going to the supermarket, we still have some level of socialization.
And there's that confinement in one space because you wake up in the morning, you're in the same room where you spent the night, and your desk is set in the same space. Now, it's literally a small prison. And how do people adapt to those confinements?
Spaces,
we need to. And what we also need to be thoughtful about is that some of the changes are very subtle. It creeps on you in a way that you don't even know that it's coming. Just very subtle changes, changes in sleep patterns, changes in appetite, mood, the deterioration in the patient, the gradual irritability, the lack of tolerance for things that you would normally be quite comfortable with.
Oh, because back then, if my husband annoyed me, I'll go and see my friend. We'll talk about something else. We'll watch something.
Now you have nowhere to go.
Now I've got nowhere to go.
You have
and
no
then
let out.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I actually appreciate most is actually going to the doctors. I actually can't put finger on what's wrong with
but something is not
and that's really important, because with that, you get questions, what's really happening to you? Are you sleeping well? Oh, no. Because we never take a self-audit of ourselves. And it's only when you are asked directly, then that helps you to actually say, what's really happening to me, I used to be like this. Now, look here, I'm just sitting there, I'm procrastinating. It's really getting worse.
I like that idea of self-audit, and I think we'll have another episode talking about our bodies and looking after ourselves personally. So I think I might just bring you back to that when we do. But I guess in thinking about what to do now, with the challenge that we've spoken, very brief, but of course if you go to africanfamilyservices.org.au, you'll see a lot of information and some information that might challenge, that you might have realized, like you say, that I'm now not in a good space. But there are things that we can still do in this time. We can, you still can take a walk. You still can phone people. Keep yourself connected. The young people, try and have that. If they are homeschooling for that week, they homeschool and use another room so that they're not in the same room. Things like them wearing their uniforms in the morning, having a shower, brushing their teeth, kind of helps them to sense a sense of normality. So look, COVID is such a broad subject, and everything we'll talk about is always a broad subject. There's always more to say and not as much time. But what we wanted to do here was just touch on things and just trigger the mind to think differently or to see things. At least know that you're not thinking about all these things or worrying about all these things on your own. We are together. The support is out there. Talk to your GP. Like I said, go on africanfamilyservices.org. And I'm sure there's a lot of local information that you can find online around looking after yourself in this difficult time. But anyway, always not enough time. Thank you so much for watching. I just want a quick word to thank our sponsors, African Family Services, Afroroots for this platform, my colleagues, my brothers here, Dr. J, Edward, and also our crew from Vic 263 for really giving us this opportunity to be in front of you today. We will be back, more episodes in this series where we'll talk about a broad range of stuff. But in the meantime, take care of yourself, keep safe, and thanks. It's Noma here from Afroroots.